Jason Kaufman, City of Delray Beach.
Great, and I think we also have a member from Brightline here. Wonderful. All right, great. Well, we're going to get started. My name is Valerie Nielsen. I'm the Executive Director here at the Palm Beach Transportation Planning Agency. And today we want to talk about transportation funding and potential options and give you a little bit of kind of an update on where we're at in our process of planning. If you are new to us, if you're new to the Palm Beach TPA, we are the federally mandated metropolitan planning organization for Palm Beach County. What that means is that we plan, prioritize, and fund federal and state dollars that come to the urban area on the federal aid system in this county, working very closely with FDOT, and we have a board of 21 locally elected officials. We have a couple here today. Thank you for joining us. And 3 advisory committees, as well as 16 staff. So what does that mean? We are collectively looking at our county, especially the urban area, and how we're moving forward. Where should those state and federal dollars go that come to this county? Our vision is a safe, efficient, and connected multimodal transportation system. So we're looking at all modes of transportation. And primarily in this county of the federal aid eligible roadway system, about half of the miles are FDOT roadways, those 563 miles. Those are the roadways and the miles that we primarily are directing funds on for state and federal dollars, but also half of the roadways are also county roadways. We have no say or authority over those roadways, but we work very closely with them. We also can prioritize some funding for the federal aid system, and also as well as the local municipalities that have about 150 miles of federal aid eligible roadways. So we exist to collaboratively make sure that the funding for the state and the feds are going to the right places, working together with all of these partners. We do not own anything. We don't operate anything. We don't construct anything. We're just primarily planning and prioritizing where the state and federal dollars are going, working with all these partners. Now, we are also part of a federally mandated urbanized area, now called the Miami-Fort Lauderdale urbanized area, which is the 3 counties. You see on this map, you see the yellow area is the urban area. That's the area where the funds that we're directing are going. And we have to work very collaboratively with Broward and Miami-Dade County. Really, we should just be one MPO for this area, but we have 3. And we are able to justify that by having the Southeast Florida Transportation Council and each of our MPO board chairs sit on that board. So we're required to do a regional transportation plan in addition to the plans for this area. Yes.
I've always been curious and I've never understood. I'm sorry. I've always been curious and never understood how the urban area is defined or determined. Is it based on urban services like water and sewer, or is it some density ratio of people per square mile or something like that?
Sure, I'll go. That's a great timing question. We're actually working through this with our committees and board. So the urban area is defined by the first census based on urbanized areas, the population and housing. And then that's the census urbanized area. And then as a metropolitan planning organization, we've smoothed that boundary out to incorporate more of the urbanized area right outside of that for any transportation services that would be considered urbanized.
So it's based on population and we try to smooth it out so there aren't any jagged edges. But that's why our agency exists, because it's in this urban area. There's also rural, state, and federal dollars that we don't prioritize. We're focused on this urban area. Oops, sorry. So when we look at this urban area, we are growing. We're over 6 million people right now, and we're expected to grow to over 7 million people in the next 25 years as an urban area. And we're also pretty built out in the urban area. So a lot of our roadways that we can do things on are built out, which means more people in the same amount of space. And trying to find ways to move these people in a safe, efficient, and connected way, we have to start thinking about other ways to move people that requires less space. So we're growing and we're working all together. So as a planning agency, what we have to do is we have a 5-year work program, which directs the dollars. It's called our Transportation Improvement Program. And that we work with FDOT, and it prioritizes projects over the next 5 years. We have about $4.2 $1.4 billion in that 5-year work program, and we update it every year for the new outer year. A lot of that is already things that FDOT has to do for maintenance, the state intermodal system, major highways like I-95, things like that, which we approve, but also we get to direct some of the funding to projects that we want to advance. So that's our 5-year work program. Why does that matter and how is it tied into the other plan that we have to approve and develop is the long-range transportation plan. So those two plans, the long-range transportation plan, 25-year horizon is updated every 5 years. So it's a big deal because that directs what goes into the transportation improvement program. Right now is a really exciting time because we're updating the long-range transportation plan. So right now we're setting the stage of where we're headed, where we're growing, what do we need, and what does everybody want? How much money do we think we're going to have, and what are the needs and options that we may be able to move that vision forward? So the long-range plan, if you're not in there, you don't get funded in our TIP. This plan establishes our goals, our objectives. It determines our needs. It determines our priorities. How are we going to be graded on performance measures? And it directs our dollars. So those two things are happening right now. So the current update is called Vision 2050. We started it last year, starting with our goals, and we also did a call for projects. We asked all of our partners, all of our municipalities, transit agencies, the county, what does everybody need? What are your transportation needs into the future so we can incorporate them into this plan in addition to FDOTs and paint a connected picture of where we're headed. We're doing also a lot of forecasting. Where is population headed? Where's the land use development? And so we just closed that a couple weeks ago. We closed the call for projects and collected all that information. And today we want to tell you about how that's looking. We still have a little ways to go. We have to do scenario planning. We got to vet everyone's projects, and then we got to build the budget and implementation over this summer for a fall winter adoption by our board in December. There'll be a draft plan in the fall and the final plan in December. But we wanted to provide an update on how that's looking. How are the transportation needs and funding needs and sources looking, and what are some options to move forward? So I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, who's going to talk about and give an update on the needs.
Okay, thanks, Valerie. And so for the transportation needs, we're really talking about all types of transportation. So roadways and signals with our partners, AFDOT, Palm Beach County, bridge rehab and maintenance work, multiple transit and mobility solutions, and then any of the local municipality needs that we have submitted. And when we talk about this 2050 vision, the long-range transportation plan update for the TPA, it really, even though we had a call for projects, a lot of these projects that we've been working through are ones that started in our 2045 long-range transportation plan. So we'll be getting into, some of you have heard the 561 mobility vision. A lot of that really started with the 2045 plan. There's also multiple other resources out there, Palm Transit Development Plan, that sets their path forward. We've done multiple studies in-house to refine some of these products that you're seeing in these next few slides. But overall, with our most recent call for projects, we got 616 products submitted. As Valerie mentioned, we're vetting those now. Our staff is working on refining those, making sure they're all mapped. Cost estimates are good. Then we'll score those products based on our performance measures, and then that will be available to the public relatively soon. We're hoping in the next month here for that full detailed list. And so we're going to go through different sections here of how we categorize some of the needs that we've seen. The first one is county roadways, then also signal needs. And that first line at the top there is signal technology. This isn't on the map, but overall working with the transit, the signal technology providers here in the county. So those who maintain the signals, that's mostly Palm Beach County, over 1,000 signals. And we also have Boca Raton traffic's here. They also have their needs. In total, that's $346 million towards signal needs. So that's upgrades of the mast arms to make a more resilient infrastructure, getting new signal boxes out there for new signal technology. And then heading into roadway projects, there's about $1.3 billion that have been identified for the county alone, Palm Beach County Engineering, when it comes to their needs into the future. Now, this isn't just out to 2045. This probably gets you past 2050, but it's $1.38 billion. The map on the right there is what those products look like for products that are capacity projects that were included in our last 2045 plan. So $854 million. And then additional products that we're getting looking to vet. That's about $500 million.
Yeah, and the other single maintaining agency is Town and Palm Beach. They're not
Correct.
included in this, right?
Yes,
So we
correct.
don't have
So-
their needs.
Yep. So there's, I think around probably 100 or so for Boca, City of Boca. There's over 1,000 for the county. And then the town of Palm Beach has about 4 or 5 signals. Yeah.
And just for clarification, so this is what we have so far as information of the county needs. These are in addition to the things that we're prioritizing for the state and roadways. So this is additional needs in addition to the funding that we prioritize and working with FDOT.
Correct. So these are only ones that were the local needs that were provided, right? So none of those major capacity projects we talked about, I-95, Turnpike, Beeline, those are all ones programmed by the DOT. And so moving forward with this, we're still, we had the ones that were approved into our LTP last time around. We are vetting all of these again for approval into the 2050 LRTP. And the one last note I wanted to mention on this is when we talk about all these major needs here, $1.38 billion for roadways and signal technology and bridges, the county does have a few revenue sources available to them that they work towards these projects for. So the first one is impact fees that you get from development. So that has to go towards capacity projects. So road widenings, intersections. And they also have whatever leftover gas taxes after they have paid for their operations and maintenance of their system. They have money available there. So it's relatively conservatively estimate that what we did last time is around $33 million a year towards that.
Quick question. So if there's $33 million a year, that's over 25 years is like $800 million, 825. So is the expectation that the other $1 billion in projects would be either not executed or covered by federal or state money allocated by the TPA or other?
Correct, or some other, and if they found another revenue source. Yep.
And so for most of these sorts of projects, what does the federal share usually average out to? Is it, because right now, let's say the county executed all these things between now and 2050, is 1.8 billion. You'd have to get about 55 or 60% federal money to execute all of those. But what do we actually normally get compared to like local funding for this sort of thing? Is it just a few percent more on top of that on average, or can we get 20 or 50% of our project needs covered by federal and state funding?
That's a really good question. I know Brian's going to talk a little bit more about that on the transit side. There's obviously lots of federal and state funding opportunities, and the pots are different for each one.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'd be easy to say that it's going to be 50% covered by federal and state, right? But there could be potentially large amounts covered by federal and state in the future, correct?
So there are funds that we prioritize that can only go on state roadways. So they are not eligible to go on these to help with the county's needs. We also have other, some funds that are federal funds that can go on the federal aid network. Some of these roadways you see on here are not part of that federal aid network, so they're also not eligible for the funding we provide. In addition, the federal dollars that we prioritize have performance measures and rules. So some of these projects are also not competitive for those, what the feds are trying to advance, which may not necessarily be widening in a rural area or things like that. So although the TPA's funding may be able to help on some of the county's needs, it's not, the source of funding that to be relied on, overall. So this is just, county needs what they need.
That's a good point. Thank you. And then local municipalities, this isn't the full list of needs, obviously, for all the municipalities within Palm Beach County, but the ones we've had submitted so far, 475 projects from the county and local submittals and the call products. What you're seeing on the map here is just those from the municipalities, not the ones that were submitted by the county. So we are vetting these as well and looking to score and prioritize these projects. And the importance of this is really for that federal and state funding, right? So if a city chooses to move forward locally with a local funding source they have to accomplish their projects, they do that already. But if they're really looking to leverage funds, that's where we really want to put it into the long range plan. We prioritize those and then we work together towards securing those federal and state funds. I'm now going to turn it over to Brian. He's going to get more into the transit side.
Andrew, just a point on that last slide, because we don't, so basically, we did a call for projects to see, ask everyone, share with us what you need, and so that we can include it in our plan, and maybe you might be eligible for federal funding in the future. But we still have to, we had 475 projects that were submitted. Not every municipality gave us what they needed, but of the ones that did, that's the number. Some of them had cost estimates, some of them didn't. And so we still have to go through that. So we don't have a dollar number to add on to the other 1.9 million billion dollars that are in needs of county. So it's that plus a lot of need from the local municipalities as well.
Great, thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Valerie. Sienna, could you move the podium to the top left of the slide so that it doesn't block anything? So I'm going to go through a series of maps to talk through what we've heard about from our transit partners through their transit development plans and working with their staff, along with some of the adopted works that we have for transit locally as part of our previous long-range transportation plan and some of the things that we are carrying forward. So we're going to start with more or less our 561 plan. So on the map, you see two different color lines. One's a lighter purple, which is representing express bus, and then the other is a blue, which represents bus rapid transit. These blue lines represent more or less our 561 plan. 5 east-west, 6 north-south corridors, 1 unified connected transit network, which is the basis of bus rapid transit. On top of that, we also have express bus service, which would essentially serve as a coach-style transit service that we already have in South Florida. This is prominent in Miami-Dade and prominent in Broward, but we haven't seen it launched in Palm Beach County yet. We are about to have our first transit express bus service launched from Port St. Lucie in a partnership between DOT and PalmTran. And in addition to that, throughout 2050, we've also seen a number of other different routes developed in anticipated need. For example, a route that would go to the Western communities that would provide people with direct access to downtown from the Glades area. In addition to that, our Northwestern communities of Westlake, Indian Trails Improvement District, Seminole Improvement District would also benefit by having some form of an express service as those communities are continuing to develop out and build out. Beyond that, the Port St. Lucie Express, as I'd mentioned previously, as well as direct connections between the city of Boca Raton and Palm Beach Gardens along 95. So these are some of the express type services that you would get from an express style service. For bus rapid transit, those corridors would more or less receive conventional bus service with about a 15-minute or better headway is what we've heard of from PalmTran. In addition to this more regionally, or I should say county-wide service, there is also, if I could get the next slide. Not sure why it's not clicking forward. Apologies. Thank you. The envisioning of curb-to-curb mobility on-demand zones. So these are the zones that we heard of specifically from PalmTran. There are a few others that we know of in the works. We know Palm Beach Gardens is looking at producing a mobility on demand zone for their area. Boynton Beach is looking at a demand zone, as is Wellington. So these are the zones that we heard of from PalmTran. And just to orient everybody in the room to what mobility on demand is, it's like what the services that you see in here about in downtown West Palm Beach, downtown Delray Beach, through their circuit or freebie services. For those who don't know, we already have a mobility on demand zone through PalmTran in the Western communities through their Go Glades service. So this transit service provides people with the ability to ride hail your transit provider and take you from the curb of where you're starting your trip to where you're ending. These services are also very helpful in enhancing services that are provided, for example, through SFRTA Tri-Rail. And in fact, they have these mobility on demand zones already at many of their station areas, providing a voucher through transportation network companies. So these 11 zones countywide would help to, 1, serve as feeders into the transit system, and then 2, help to close some of those local single occupancy vehicle trips by making it a transit trip.
So just to kind of tag on to this, this is showing kind of the vision for PalmTran to have on-demand mobility zones that don't warrant an all-day bus running around all the time, but it could connect to those more frequent express or all-day, or express or frequent routes. It's not showing local municipal needs unless, we heard from them, but we know that West Palm Beach has an on-demand mobility zone. We know Wellington, Boynton, Boca, Palm Beach Gardens, and different cities are starting to look into that, of having their own mobility, like what we have here, circuit downtown. But this is just what you're seeing on the screen right now is just what Palm Trans envisioning, converting some of their bus service into on-demand mobility zones as well.
Correct. And bonus point, if you're thinking about launching an on-demand zone, work with us to get this mapped, one. And two, consider contracting with Palmtran, who already has on-demand contracts on hand that could expedite getting this type of transit service into your system faster than going through a conventional procurement. You could do an interlocal agreement, for example, to get it done even quicker. Next up, we've recently had a lot of conversation about the expansion of passenger rail service into Palm Beach County. And I want to take a moment to just reflect on the historical demand for the expansion of tri-rail service into northern sections of Palm Beach County, not just through the VA extension, which is depicted as kind of the isolated line over here, which is really an extension of the current tri-rail service, but also switching over closer to the downtown and running the service into Jupiter, with 5 stops located throughout Palm Beach County. This project has been on our long-range transportation plan for decades. And without moving this project forward, it will continue to have a consistent demand and need for transit as we go into the northern counties. This area is also ripe for additional station area planning and work by our partners. Nevertheless, it is identified in our long-range transportation plan, these 2 independent projects into northern Palm Beach County through Tri-Rail Coastal Link and through the VA extension. We've also included the Coastal Link extension southward into Broward. Andrew's going to talk a little bit more about how our partners to the south have funded expansion of commuter rail on the FEC Brightline tracks. But these are all projects located in our long-range transportation plan for some time, and they will continue to be until they're envisioned or we can move another plan forward. Additionally, we have 2 other projects that have been moving forward. First of which is the State Road 7 Okeechobee Multimodal Corridor Study, which will connect the mall at Wellington Green by 13 stops into downtown West Palm Beach. That is also depicted here through Palm Beach County. And the second stop, second transit route we will be analyzing in the near future, is connection to the Palm Beach International Airport to downtown West Palm Beach through either a loop or a direct connection via those facilities. These options come in many shapes and forms. So we know Tri-Rail SFRTA service very, very well. But the services that we haven't seen in Palm Beach County, or really in the South Florida region overall, are light rail and streetcar. These are potential options to help move mobility forward, especially if you complement them with a mixture of development rights and regulations, moving parking as a form of transportation demand management, and other services. So when you put all of these transportation pieces together, you really do have county-wide transit service wherever you can provide it, whether it be through mobility on-demand zones, feeding into express bus systems, or feeding into rapid transit systems. You come up with a more complete picture of what transit could look like in Palm Beach County. And I will say all the systems that we showed on the screen today, they come to a capital investment of about $2.5 billion, with obviously annual operations and maintenance that goes with that. Now, what's important to recognize about the capital investment for these premium transit systems is that the federal government and the state government are very keen on moving more people into transit and providing matching funds to local governments who are willing to invest in their communities through transit. Those matching funds range anywhere from 20% or less, however much you want to, how low do you want to go, up to 80%. So if we're talking about an 80% match of that $2.5 billion, you could get an additional $2 billion from the federal government, bringing that local government cost substantially down. So when we're talking about how we're going to expend our funds and how we're going to get a better match from our federal and state partners, the transit system will provide you a really great opportunity to do so. And why that's important is because of all of the things on the screen. We know that South Florida is in trouble when it comes to resiliency. And we know that our roadways are not going to be able to handle all the things that we need to have in the future. And we're going to have reduced capacity because of that. We are a growing population. And I wish that we could get to the place where we have, lines of kids walking to school instead of lines of cars clogging the roadways. But without safe systems, we won't get there. And we need to provide people with the access to the opportunity. Amazon's not going to go away. Your daily packages are also using the same clogged transportation systems that we have. And without providing people with new transportation options that help us get to a point of where we have a good enough quality of life, where our FAU students and our PBAU students aren't dying to leave this urbanized county to get to a place with real transit options, we're going to be in a rough spot. It also becomes a question of affordability. Transportation and housing affordability are inextricably linked. We're spending 60% on average of our household budgets on housing and affordability combined. We're less than Florida, but we're one of the most expensive metropolitan areas in the region. And you don't need to look further than many of the housing authorities who are kicking and screaming about saying, we want affordable housing, but we need to put it in the right place. And if we're putting affordable housing in the areas which are not key locations along transit corridors, we're not doing anybody a service, because their transportation cost increases offset the housing that you're providing them. So I would encourage you all to just consider the transit that we've system that we've thought about, and with respect to today's priorities. We've largely built out our roadway network. It focuses on vehicle speed, and we've put a lot of lives on the line and lost a lot of lives in our current roadway system. This is Okeechobee Boulevard today. Do we want to continue to invest in this style of development and this style of roadway growth? Or can we change course? Can we have a different future that looks at, and if you could hit the next slide for me, I think when you zoom it changes the clicker for me. If you think about our enhanced future, we can still continue to grow in Palm Beach County. I would love to say Palm Beach County is full and that we're not going to have more people coming, but we're going to get another 11,000 people a year that are going to come to Palm Beach County, and they're going to want their goods and services moved just as efficiently as people are getting them now. But for that to happen, we need to think about the trade-offs that we are going to get and the transit corridors that we can invest in and how we're going to move people into the future. When we think about things differently, we get more homes, we get more jobs, we get more ad valorem taxes to pay for some of these things. So when we looked at Okeechobee Boulevard last year, and we concluded our study that found, there's about 20,000 units that we could build between State Road 7 and Wellington and downtown West Palm Beach. About 15% of that would be affordable. If you just zoom in to the microcosm of Military Trail, within a half mile of that watershed, we could get 1,100 new homes, of which 76 can be affordable. There could be more if you go up or down in density, but you also get 13,000 new jobs, and you get $650 million in ad valorem taxes just in that watershed alone. So when we talk about funding the system, if we do things just slightly differently than how we've done them in the past, we get a better community, we get a more affordable community, and we get a better quality of life. And we get a place that looks nicer. It's really important to just say that this is not a place where people will feel safe, dignified, or comfortable walking, biking, or any other mode other than being in their steel car. This is the type of future that we need to think about and that we need to be investing in. And when it comes to how we go about funding this, there is a substantial gap into the future for transportation needs. So to close that out, I'm going to pass it back over to Andrew, who's going to discuss some of the options that we have in the future and directions we can go in the county.
All right, thanks, Brian. And so when we had this 561 vision that was established in our 2045 long range transportation plan. Around that same time, with our partner agencies for Southeast Florida Transportation Council, which includes Broward and Miami-Dade, they also had their enhanced transit network, the Vision 2100, and then the SMART plan. And so the map you see here is that full regional desires plan.
And sorry, Sienna, can you move the camera? So we're kind of covering Palm Beach County, but the point of this
Sure.
map is that that the 561 plan, which is primarily FDOT corridors that we've identified, which happen to be currently Palm Trans highest ridership corridors, also high crash corridors, and the Tri-Rail Coastal Link or commuter rail vision and extension. That network ties into this regional plan, and it ties into Broward's enhanced transit system and Miami-Dade's enhanced transit system that are moving forward. So go ahead.
And so also what we identified in that 2045 regional transportation plan is, yes, we had this desired and this needs network of regional transportation and an enhanced transit network. But there's some other things policy related that we really needed to start pushing forward if we're ever going to see this vision into the future. And so in that CEF Tech plan, there was 4 key components of that. We believed in a regional transit with supporting infrastructure. Having complementary land use is what Brian touched on. Having flexible revenue spending so that the dollars that are already available to us, they may only be able to be used for road capacity, having more flexibility and meeting our needs in the future for a region. And then lastly, what we're talking about today is new revenue sources are necessary. So based on the full needs of what we need for the region, we need to identify new revenue sources. This was not only passed by CEF Tech as a regional body, but also passed by the Palm Beach TPA in December of 2020. And so when it comes to new revenue sources being necessary, we're really talking about local funding opportunities. There's plenty of research out there. The CEF Tech RTP also has a tech memo on this that looked at different types of revenue streams into the future. The most common one you see nationwide is a sales tax. And reasons for that, some of the positives, it is a relatively stable and consistent source of funding. It is the most popular funding source to go after. And then also visitors pay into that sort of tax. So that's something that's really beneficial for places such as Palm Beach County and South Florida in general, who has a lot of visitors who come in and who can contribute to that transportation infrastructure. Nationwide, just last year and fiscal year 2022 data, when it came to all types of revenue sources that local urban transit agencies are collecting, the sales tax was the top contributor for that, for those local revenue sources. And then when we look at the ones who've established those sort of services here, there's surtaxes here in Florida, there's the infrastructure surtax, and there's also this transportation surtax. The 3 counties within Florida that have a transportation surtax are 2 partners in the South, Broward and Miami-Dade. Broward would be the one who most recently passed theirs. There's timeframes that go a max 30 years on that surtax. And then the 2 other ones we have is Miami-Dade with a half penny that began in 2003 and Duval with a half penny that began in 1989. Both of those expire upon repeal. So those happened, those are indefinite until they are repealed. And so the types of surtaxes we have available here in Florida that go towards transportation, there's 2. There's transportation system surtax, and then also an infrastructure surtax. And the infrastructure surtax is what we're currently having here in Palm Beach County. And there's some distinction about these. So they can both go towards transportation, but the main caveat when it comes to transportation investments is that the transportation system surtax can go towards not just the planning, development, and construction of a system, but also the operations and maintenance. So it has that operations piece, which is what the infrastructure surtax cannot do. It can go towards capital and maintenance investments, so it can be leveraged for federal and state funds. But really, when it comes to gaining those federal and state funds down to our county, you need to show that ongoing operations commitment to that investment. And that's really what a transportation system surtax can get you. So again, here's that regional map with CEF Tech and the high, medium, and low transit investments. And right now, Broward has pushed forward with a surtax to start implementing that and securing federal and state grants. Miami-Dade has done the same. And so they are also securing federal and state grants towards creating this system. And in Broward County, they have a series of projects going on. Broward Commuter Rail, one of the larger ones, moving forward. And then Miami-Dade has a SMART program. So both of these are being implemented. They're working through the product development and environmental studies. They are now securing funds for many of these corridors at the federal and state level.
And if I could just elaborate a little bit on our partners to the south and what they're working on. By 2027, Broward Community Rail is expected to launch in that county, along with 2 BRT projects and light rail projects. And I think it's important to draw that distinction because Broward only recently passed a transportation surtax or a dedicated source of funding for transportation. Miami-Dade County has been moving swiftly along and since the adoption of their SMART plan to launch multiple types of new transit services throughout the county, all which closely reflect what we've had in Palm Beach County envisioned through our long-range transportation planning process. Mobility on demand zones, express buses, bus rapid transit, and those services are provided countywide. So these are partners which have implemented these types of services in rapid, form since the adoption of a major plan to move forward with funding for new scenarios.
And I'll just add, so we mentioned that Broward County in 2018 passed a 1 cent. The county developed the plan of what they would need and what they would use that funding for. They did try in 2016, it didn't pass, but they passed in 2018. So these are obviously led by the implementing agency, the county, Broward County, with their Primo plan, and then also the SMART plan in Miami-Dade County. Now our counterparts, the MPOs there, are our partners, and they help with matching funds and help move that forward. But these are county-led initiatives because they're the ones receiving the money and implementing the projects.
And then here in Palm Beach County, there is a current infrastructure surtax that was passed in 2016. The revenue is expected to be collected from 2017 to 2026, and it's anticipated sunset by the end of 2025, passing what their original max was going to be, $2.7 billion in proceeds. So they've already collected 2.2 by December of 2023, this past month. And that distribution was broken down. Half a penny goes towards the school board, and then there's a 30-20 split for Palm Beach County and municipalities. And so this is a little bit more of elaborate breakdown of what that looked at historically for revenues for that infrastructure surtax. So a penny of the surtax going back to 2017, going all the way to 2025, around $331 million a year. And then what a projected surtax of 1 cent would look like. So a half cent and then a full cent. So a full cent of $350 million a year for 10 years would be $3.5 billion. Just want to make a note here. You'll see that it flatlines. It is a conservative estimate here. The county surtax, when they first went after that and passed that, it was projected to increase by 3% every year. And they actually blew past that, and they're ending that one early. So we put in a flat line of the projected revenue for this, just for purposes of this conversation, so you can see it based on today's capital expenses and our needs versus what a dollar is valued at today. But it'd be expected to generate more than that with growth into the county and then also inflation. And so those are just what the totals would look like for a penny and a half penny of a surtax. Look at the annual of $350 million for a surtax at 1%, and then a 30-year total, that maximum amount that you can pass through a referendum, $10.5 billion. Again, with really a flat line here of projections. And so when you think about this versus what Brian and I showed earlier on with the needs in our county, you can sort of draw a comparison about those long-term needs of transit investments in the roadway and the signal capacity and those local needs versus what might some of that might be covered with this sort of revenue source. And then we've talked a lot about leveraging federal and state funds, and this is really where you can bring in a lot of dollars. Here's just an example of what happens when you have design, right-of-way, and construction paid for with federal and state funds when you do go after another types of funding source locally, right? So for design, right-of-way, and construction of a project, if you do leverage those federal and state funds, which you can pay up to 60 to 80%, and then once you're trying to secure that funding, the state of Florida is also looking to be competitive with that. So they help with a lot of those matches, and they can pay up to 10 to 20% of that. And so you're really left with paying for capital expenses, just a portion of that total capital expense for some major projects, billion-dollar projects, right? So a transportation surtax and an infrastructure surtax, both of those options that are available to us can be done for capital expenses like that. But then when it comes to a commitment to operate and maintain, this is sort of your ongoing costs when it comes, especially for transit here, is that there is some leverage when it comes to federal and state funds paying for your operation and maintenance, but a lot of that is really local funding. So this is just an example I provided. This is actually Palm Tran, on average, what they're paying for operations and maintenance of their system. 73% of that is local, right? So if you're leveraging a tax or leveraging some type of surtax into the future, a transportation surtax could pay for this, whereas an infrastructure surtax could not when it comes to the operations portion. And then a real world example for you. This is our partner in the South. We talked about them really being able to go after and leverage federal and state competitive dollars. This is the Miami-Dade South Corridor Rapid Transit. This is a rendering of one of the stations there in the south part of Miami-Dade County. This is actually pretty close to looking like this. It's going to open sometime early this year. And this was a product that's around $300 million total. They were able to use their transportation surtax as that local match, and they got $129 million of federal investment. And then the state was able to use their transit capital investment in that as well, of another $100 million. And so it paid up most of the total for the capital investments. And then long term, when it comes to transit operating expenses, you can still expect some sort of mostly local operating cost towards that with some federal and state assistance. Next steps, I'm going to turn it over to Valerie.
Great, thank you. So we've covered some of a snapshot of the needs that we've seen so far, not including what the TPA primarily prioritizes, but additional needs that we can't fund. And so we're on this journey of going through this process and trying to educate everybody and trying to build a village to raise awareness of this because we're planning into the future. So some of our next steps, again, these initiatives are usually led by the county, by the economic development communities, by the private sectors in terms of making that local case to pass these types of funding referendums. We are a state federal kind of match for those projects, but we have certain rules around our funding. So we need to have that local match so that we can prioritize the premium transit investments for capital, but also help the county and the transit agencies leverage federal and state dollars for those matches, which there's a lot more opportunity when it comes to premium transit and mobility, because that's what the feds and state are really trying to push, especially in urban areas where we're already built out. So some of the next steps that we're going to be doing is educational events. We have we're planning a transportation funding, basically like peer roundtable, where we're going to invite decision makers, elected officials, economic development community and others. Really, it's open to anyone, but we're going to invite key speakers from other areas, including Broward County. Why did they pass a transportation surtax? What was their journey? What was their story? And what are they doing with it? What is Miami doing with it? What are some of our peer areas in other areas of the country? Hear their stories and really kind of hopefully shed a light on how can we move forward. We mentioned we're in the middle of this long range transportation plan. We're going to continue gathering information, scenario planning, and hopefully continue to get information from all of our partners to be this winter, spring, summer, to have a better, clearer picture of all of that. And really, we want to instill our partners to help us raise awareness and move this forward. Because if we really want to not be Carmageddon and not be stuck in congestion and people dying, we said earlier, 200 lives lost a year here in this county. So, if we really want to improve quality of life, leverage all that money we're missing out on because we don't have that local match. Brian showed some really impactful slides on that as well. We're really going to need that local leadership to push forward on this. So we really want to engage with our partners and really kind of start building those types of coalitions and those types of just kind of, raising awareness about all this. And hopefully we can get there. We can follow in step of our partners to the south, as we are the only county in this urbanized area without that transportation surtax. And as we mentioned, an infrastructure surtax is a funding source for the county and for the cities. However, that can only fund capital, which is also what we fund. So the transportation surtax, if there's funding for that, it can also fund operations and maintenance. So we saw a lot of needs today. We saw that it was about almost 1.8, $1.9 billion worth of county needs of roadways and signals. We don't, with a question mark still on the cities, because we received 475 project needs from them. And then we also saw the premium, basically the vision of premium transit and mobility for this county is also around $2 billion. So it's a lot of funding needs that we need in this county. And if a half cent continues for infrastructure or transportation, probably roadways and signals and drainage and really like crucial things is what's going to take that up. And if we have a 1 cent like Broward, we can actually have money dedicated for premium transit above and beyond things that actually move the needle with land use redevelopment, economic development, and all those things that kind of all work together. So next steps are really to continue down this path and continued engagement, and hopefully all of you can, help us all work together collaboratively to keep exploring going down this path. So in the timeline I mentioned earlier, we have happens every 5 years, so it's a very special time right now. We're updating this long-range transportation plan that directs our urban, state, and federal dollars, and we're doing the needs assessment now. We just closed the call for projects. So we'll be working on these steps through the rest of this year for final plan adoption at the end of the year. So different things going on, but please stay tuned, stay involved. And this is the website to stay involved. You can subscribe for updates in terms of our long range transportation plan. And with that, I know I mentioned we're recording this presentation, so we're going to end the recording, but we have workshop boards and, it's open for discussion. We're going to make the presentation available, both the recording and the PowerPoint available after this. So thank you so much for participating. And with that, we'll stop the recording.